It's April 10, Ukraine Media Center Ukrinform continues its operation. My name is Svetlana Chaprenko, and now we will be talking about the strikes on the Navy of the Russian Federation and fighting the enemy Navy on the sea. Joining us online is Dmytro Pletenchuk, the spokesperson for the Ukrainian Navy of the Armed Forces of Ukraine. Good morning, Mr. Dmytro. Good morning, everybody. So, Mr. Dmytro, just a couple of hours ago, you reported in a social network about the destruction of the enemy helicopter in Crimea this morning. So, can you please give us more detail? How were we able to fulfill this operation? Well, it's a little bit too early to talk about the operation. We can only state the fact that the helicopter has fallen. In the same way, there was information about this catastrophe that was preceded by an explosion, so most likely it didn't just fall due to technical discrepancies, but probably there was an event unfolding on board. We may state that it was going on during the dawn. Right away, the rescue operation was initiated with more helicopters engaged, as well as a Raptor type vessel, and most likely the operation is over by now. There is still no verified information about the losses of enemy personnel. Thank you. And this morning there was a ballistic strike by the enemy inflicted on Odessa. Maybe you can share any information about the aftermath of this enemy attack. Well, talking about the strikes on the city of Odessa, this information should be reported by another grouping of troops, so I'm not ready to give any comments. However, I can only state that the enemy keeps using the territory of temporarily occupied Crimea to initiate strikes like this, which once again emphasizes the statement that without liberation of this territory, any conversations about security are vain. And another statement is that the enemy gives priority to use of the land platforms, mobile land platforms, for inflicting fire strikes without engaging of maritime component. I mean the missile carriers. Well, the enemy vessel Serpukhov that was damaged recently, and there was information that right before the damage, the enemy was going to bring it in the equator of the Black Sea. Well, so what's the situation with that vessel? Well, it was discussed. We were saying that there is a connection between the Baltic region to Azov and Black Sea region, so technically it's possible. However, complicated because there are certain restrictions for this type of vessel, and maybe it should have been taken apart, at least partially, for such transportation. But we think that this information is more of an analytical nature, because we are not ready to confirm any such plans of the enemy, and there is no any real purpose for this. The point is that the Russian occupiers they were planning the similar ships, but just another project called Karakurt. They were prepared for the Black Sea Basin operations in a number of 5 vessels. There were more ships built like this under Project Buyan, and currently they cannot ensure the provide for proper operation of the existing vessels, because 2 of them currently are supposed to be. Mr. Dmytro, we've ceased hearing you. I apologize. Yeah, let me repeat myself, that there is no real reason for bringing ships from one sea basin to another, because the similar class project, the small missile carriers of Karakurt project that are being constructed over there in Zelenodolsk, as well as the Buyan project vessels, they currently cannot even pass the state tests in the Black Sea Basin, because the Russians are forced to hide them in the naval base of Novorossiysk. So bringing yet another vessel that has no even place to stay at, well, hardly Russians will do that. Well, you've emphasized that the enemy is afraid of bringing their vessels to the sea basin. So what is the condition of the enemy navy for the time being? What is its condition after repeated precise strikes? Well, in fact, they focused all of their battle vessels in Novorossiysk, using, the fact that Ukraine complies with the requirements of international maritime law, international protocols, and they are currently staying in their territorial waters. Only those assets are remaining in Crimea that are either being repaired, at least 15 of them, or those that they do not have opportunity to bring to other bases, so they're basically are closed in their bases. The passage from the harbor is closed too. The operation of other ports such as Tuapse or Sochi is complicated by the fact that the infrastructure and protection is not sufficient for these type of vessels. This is why they bring them all to Novorossiysk base. They also use they also are unable to use the base in Ochamchiri in Abkhazia to a proper extent, because it's just a small base and it's only the Coast Guard of FSB staying there, because the bigger vessels cannot maneuver over there. So we preserve, so to say, a status quo. The only thing that we observe in the new tactics of the new command of the Black Sea Navy of the so-called Russian Federation is that they engage more of aviation component in terms of patrolling, and this event that happened today, it can be corrected by this fact, because the fleet is pretty old, the operation is pretty intense. They recommissioned even B-12 aircraft that were about to be decommissioned, so they've recommissioned them for patrolling of the Black Sea Basin. So cases like these can be cases like the one that happened today may be repeated shortly. Also, they resumed the use of submarines, and one of the verified cases of the carrier of the cruise missile was the submarine, which is currently staying at its base. And among others, the enemy also uses the anti-ship missile to inflict strikes on the cities. So in your opinion, why do they resort to use of this type of missiles? Well, they use the available arsenals, they use the mobile capability, because all those platforms are wheel-based. They are based on the systems of Bastion, and the armament outside Crimea may be loaded in there, so thus they can hide or conceal the places of their location. Also, it's difficult to track the platforms that don't have permanent location, that change their launch sites, and that's why they resort to using this type of weapon from Crimea. Well, talking about the maritime humanitarian corridor, to what extent does it operate and how do we manage to ensure its safe operation? Well, it operates in a stable manner. Obviously, its operation is covered by the Navy, Coast Guard and other components of the security and defense forces, but talking about the security in the water, obviously we do the monitoring and respond to the situations related to mine threat, which is like a key threat now. Also, you see that lately the enemy intensified the use of the airspace to inflict fire damage, and we were emphasizing it multiple times that yes, for us the biggest problem is still the advantage of the Russian aviation in the airspace over the equator of the Black Sea, the permanent reconnaissance and fire damage, as well as the use of missiles, including ballistic missiles. So yes, this is still a problem we have to solve. Our colleagues and our partners from other security and defense forces continue working on this issue. Another factor of threat in the Black Sea is mining. The extent of it is colossal. Do you operate any numbers in terms of density of mining? Well, the latest figures were 400 such objects. However, the full picture we will be able to see it after the end of the battle operations, after there will be a full-scale demining operation that will be preceded by relevant monitoring. The problem of the mines in the equator of the Black Sea is also contributed to the fact that the sea is an element. The mines can be chaotically moved during the storm. So yes, the work is complicated, and again, demining in the land is one thing, demining in the sea is like already three axes, because there is also the axis of depth, so the process is complicated. We can say that the situation is under control of the Navy. You see the corridor continues operating in a stable manner. This year there were no cases documented, the documented cases of detonation of such mines. Well, obviously the equipment is not sufficient to the extent that we would like to have it, but we use the available equipment mostly. We use the drones, the underwater drones for demining, and this is why the topic of training of the last year was international demining, contributed by the Navy. Thank you very much for your report. Do we have any questions on the floor? Ukrinform, Marina Kožuchar. We mostly get the reports about the situation in the Black Sea. Can you give us more color on the situation in the Sea of Azov? To what extent does the enemy use the port of Azov? And generally, can you give us a little bit more information about the Sea of Azov? Thank you. Thank you for your question. It's quite an important one, and it's worth mentioning that unfortunately all of the shore of the Azov Sea is occupied by the so-called Russian Federation. They even tried to make it internal waters of Russian Federation according to their legislation, which does not have real legal reasons and no legal force. And in the same way, there is no military activity observed there. There are no battle units stationed there. On top of that, the navigation is difficult in the Sea of Azov. There are no such huge depth as in the Black Sea. The maximum depth is 15 meters, and to some extent for them it simplifies the matter of protection of this equator. Yes, they do use the port of Mariupol in violation of all of the international maritime laws. They switch off the identification systems FOF. They continue bringing everything that is stolen from the temporarily occupied territories. They bring it to the port of Mariupol. No matter how surprising it is, they still steal the grain, the metal, but tracking the situation there is pretty difficult because all of the shoreline is under the control of Russian Federation for the time being. Mr. Dmytro, thank you very much for your comprehensive answers. Let me remind you that joining us was Dmytro Pletenchuk, spokesperson for the Ukrainian Navy, and Ukraine Media Center Ukrinform will continue its operation today. Stay tuned. See you tomorrow.